Hey, we are going to make a graph of velocity versus time for our wheel lab. Um, this is Lillian's graph, and so she's got position versus clock reading for her wheels, the low incline and the high incline. And remember, I told you that on sheets, in order to put two sets of data onto one set of graph axes, you're going to kind of arrange your data like this, where you've got your independent variable here, and then here's one set of independent variable, dependent variable. And then you're going to organize another set here right underneath. Here's the independent variable underneath the first set, but then your dependent variable you're going to put kind of out to the side here. And you don't have to do it this way, but I just find it the easiest way to get Sheets to do what you want it to do. And so if you remember our strategy for making a velocity versus time graph, the original way that we did it was by hand drawing the graph and then making tangent lines all over that graph and finding the slopes of tangent lines. And then later on, we found out that what you can do is actually find the slopes of connecting lines. So like you would say, hey, here's a connecting line from time 0 to time 1. We'll find the slope of that line. And then that average velocity, the slope of a connecting line, right? The average velocity from time 0 to time 1 is the instantaneous velocity right in the middle of that time, so at time 0.5. And then the average velocity from time 1 to time 2 is the instantaneous velocity right in the middle of that time, or at time 1.5, and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our data and we're just going to find the slope of every single connecting line here, which sounds kind of like a pain, but it's actually pretty easy because remember the slope is just rise over run. And so with the spreadsheet, what we can do is we can calculate the rise as just the difference between each one of these positions. And we can calculate the run as the difference between each one of these clock readings and then just divide the two. So we're going to build a little sheet that will let us do that. So what I want to do right now is copy and paste some of our data over onto another sheet. So when you have your Google Sheets open, I don't know how many of you guys knew this, but you can open up a new sheet into, I guess, what's called your worksheet. And we'll call this, if I double click on that, we'll call this velocity time. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take just the first set of data. So I'm going to take the low wheel data, and I'm going to, I think it's Alt-C or Control-C or right-click for you guys. If you right-click, you get the contextual menu, and we're going to copy with Command-C on a Mac, and like I said, I think on a Chromebook it's Alt-C, or actually I think it's Control-C. And you can tell you did it right because it puts a little highlight there. I'm going to come over here to the velocity versus time tab. I'm going to click in that first cell and I'm going to paste, or right click and paste, or Command V, or on the Mac. I guess that's Control V. And then I'm not going to do anything with the high wheel data yet. I'm just going to do everything with this. And the first thing I want to do is put spaces in between all of these. So if I right click on this row here and insert one above, then it puts a space in there. And I'm going to do that for every one of these rows. So at 5, I'm going to do that again. The shortcut for this is redo. So Command Z or Control Z is undo. Command Y or Control Y is redo. So if I click on there and I redo, then it'll just keep on inserting rows between every one of my data points. I'll just keep scrolling down and do this. This step, by the way, it's not absolutely necessary to do. It's there to kind of help organize your data, and you'll see what I mean in a second. But for people who are using computers and using our Logger Pro software to do this, or graphical analysis to do this, actually Logger Pro, you'll see that they don't actually do this step. But I like to organize it this way. One of the worksheets that you took home over the break has it organized this way as well. The reason is when you're looking at rise over run, the rise is not here and it's not there. The rise is between these two, so we're going to put our values in these spaces. So this is our raw data over here. Our calculated data is actually going to be in between, because remember what we're doing, we're trying to find the slope of this connecting line. So the slope doesn't go with the the first point or the last point. It's actually the slope of the line between the 2 points. All right. So now that we've got our data copied over there, I'm going to start making our calculated column. So we're going to do rise over run. So the rise is the change in the position, right? And the change in position has a fancy physics name, and that is displacement. And that's going to be in centimeters. Oh, one more thing is I don't like the way that looks, so I'm going to click on this whole row here, row 1, and I'm going to go to Format, and go down to Text Wrapping, and hit Wrap. And that way it doesn't cut off stuff because it kind of drives me crazy. All right, so now we're going to type in a formula here. So the formula is we want the change from this square to this square. So that's just this square. So if I type the equals, that tells me that I want to type a formula in. I'm going to hit equals this cell, and I click on that cell, and then I type minus this cell. And when you hit enter, you'll see that that gives me back an answer of 1. So this is telling, if I click on the cell, you can see equals B4 minus B2. So equals this cell minus this cell. That's what it's doing. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fill that down. So the weird thing is if I drag this down, it'll fill. But see how it puts a 0 in there? That's kind of annoying. So I'm going to undo that. If I actually highlight both of these cells, then it has a formula and a blank. And now when I fill down, it'll continue that pattern of putting a formula and a blank, all the way down. So I can drag this down, make sure that works. And yes, it does. I'm going to undo that so you can see it's slower. I'm sorry. So I'm going to click on the cell with the formula in it and drag down to the empty space. So I've got a formula in this one, I've got a blank in this one, and then this little square down there is the fill handle, and I'll take that, I'll click it, and I'll drag it all the way down. And I can kind of hold my thumb down on the trackpad and then scroll with my 2 fingers to get all the way down to the bottom, and that puts the formula in between each one of these. So 1.7 is the difference between 1 and 2.7. 2.6 is the difference between 2.7, 5.3, and so on. So now what we've got is we've got the rise for every single one of our sets of 2 points. Right? So basically, what we've just done is we've calculated all of these rises. The rise, the rise, the rise, 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 rise. Next thing we want to do is calculate the run. And the run has a fancy physics name, and that is time interval. And we measured in weird units called beats. And again, I'm going to put that here because it's the time interval doesn't go with 0 and it doesn't go in 1. It's how much time has gone by between 0 and 1. So type in equals to tell the spreadsheet that I want to type a formula in there. And then how do I calculate that? I just take this cell and I type in the minus sign, this cell. So A4 minus A2. And when I hit enter, that gives me the correct answer, which is 1. You guys probably know this, but it's always going to be 1 because the clock readings was our independent variable, and we just chose to look at the position every whole clock reading. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I fill this down, and again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select 1 and the row below it, or the cell below it, and then I'm going to drag this fill handle and just drag that all the way down. And that will give me the correct run, which is 1 every single time. Now, it looks kind of simple for this experiment, but in other experiments, maybe the time interval isn't the same all the time, or maybe the time interval is 2 beats or half a second or some other number. Okay. All right, next, I'm going to calculate my velocity. So now I've got the rise and I've got the run, so now I can calculate the velocity. This is an average velocity, but I'm just going to type in velocity because it shows up better in the, you know what, let's not. Let's type in average velocity and we'll change it later. Because remember that the slope of a connecting line is an average velocity in centimeters per feet. And to do that, I'm going to click here. And the average velocity is just the displacement divided by the time interval. That's average v equals delta x over delta t. So I'm going to type in my equal sign to tell it I want a formula. I'm going to say it's the displacement, click on that cell, slash for divide, time interval. Hit enter, and it's 1. And you guys probably can tell what's going to happen here. Because our time interval is always 1, the number value for the average velocity is always going to be the same as the number value for the displacement. Because this is a pretty simple experiment we just did. But that's okay. This will work for any experiment we do with position and clock reading. And it won't always be the displacement divided by 1. So now we've got our average velocity, and then the trick is, remember that the slope of this connecting line, right? So say this is 0 to 1, or 1 to 2, or 2 to 3, or here, how about this one, from 5 to 6? The slope of the graph from 5 to 6 is the average velocity from time 5 to time 6. But it's the instantaneous velocity at time 5.5. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a time column that we're going to call middle time. That's going to be in beats. And that is going to be the time that's right in the middle of the two clock readings. So between 0 and 1, the time is 0.5. There's a bunch of ways you can do this, but I'm just going to show you something now just so you have some handy spreadsheet tool to use for later. And that is the average. So in this case for clock reading, the middle number, the number exactly in between 0 and 1 is actually the average of 0 and 1. So we're going to use a function on the spreadsheet called average. So I'm going to type equals. And when I start typing A, V, E, you'll see average pop up. So this is what I want, the numerical average. Click on that. And then a parenthesis pops up because it wants me, kind of like when you say f of x, like what are you doing the function to? So it wants to know what do you want the average of? So I'm just going to say, hey, I want the average of these cells right here from 0 to 1. Now, normally when you do this, it's more than 2 numbers. Okay, so you could do this if you have like 10 rows of numbers that you want to do. You can just drag on the whole thing and find the average. Because of course the other way that you could do this is you could say, hey, look, this is equal to, and I'll type in a parenthesis, it's going to be this cell plus this cell, and then parentheses divided by 2, right? That would be another way to get the exact same number. But like I was saying, if you have a lot of data that you have to do, if you have more than one row, then typing the formula manually, this cell plus this cell plus this cell plus this cell, doing that over and over and over again, it's going to take a long time. So just using this average function is just a faster way to do things. Okay. And again, I'm going to click on 2 cells here so I can get the space below, drag down, and that should give me my middle time. And you can see the middle time follows a pattern because it's every half second in between here, right? 0.5, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, and so on. All right, let's see if we can get our high data in here in a faster, easier way. Hope this doesn't make things harder. Okay, here we go. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on all these things that I just did, right? Clock reading, position, displacement, all this stuff. I'm going to highlight the whole thing. So I'm going to go all the way down to here. By the way, I just shift-clicked to get there, right? So click on this corner of the data that I want, and then scroll down until I get to the bottom. So here's the bottom corner. I'm going to shift-click on that, and that selects all of it. And I'm going to hit Command-C or Control-C to copy. You can tell you did it right because it highlights everything in an outline. And I'm going to scooch over here a little bit, and I'm going to paste. So Command-V or Control-V. And now I've got a copy of my stuff, right? But what I want to do is I want to change this. So instead of the position low, I want my position high here. High. And let's go back. Let's go back here. This average velocity, this is the average velocity low. I should probably make that distinction right now for our graph. So here's my position high. And you'll notice this is the wrong data, right? Because this is my low data. So I'm just going to delete all this. So I'm going to highlight that, click it all, delete. I'm going to take my average velocity, change this to average velocity high. There we go. And now I've got a whole bunch of blanks. So I need to take my high data and put it in here. So I'm going to go to position time. I'm going to find out where my high data is. Here it is. It's starting at 0. Going to here. Copy that. Go here. And then paste, Command-V. And there you go. And then you'll notice the problem is that I didn't skip all these cells, right? So I need to put the cells back in. So now instead of highlighting the whole row and inserting cells, I'm just going to click on the individual cell, and I'll right click, or I think it's alt click on a Chromebook or control click on a MacBook. And I'm going to insert cells. And then I want to, I hope I do this right, I want to shift them down. Let's see if that does it right. Yes, it does. So I did that with that one. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Again, Command Y is redo, or Control Y is redo, redo. Click here, shift them down. So I'm just going to space out my data again so that I have stuff, have an empty cell in between. Undo. Having a little trouble here. Okay, let's try again. Insert cells, shift down. Then redo. All right. And then that's interesting. Well, I was trying to save some time, and I totally didn't save any time. So this formula got messed up because we scooched the cell on it, I think. So we're gonna have to retype these anyway. Sorry about that, guys. I was hoping to save you some time, I totally didn't. All right, so we're gonna so this 6.5 is actually going from here to here, because before I stuck these two cells in, this 6.5 was here, and when I moved the cell down, this formula tracked that cell all the way down here, and so this orange cell used to be up here before I stuck two cells in there, and so Sheets was trying to read my mind, and it just my mind was not working the way Sheets wanted it to work. Sorry. All right, so we're going to retype this formula in. This is going to be equals, right? Displacement is this position minus the initial position, right? Final position minus initial position. And we'll hit enter. And then again, we'll click here, select both of those cells, and fill it all the way down. There we go. Oh, funny. We don't have, because it's the high incline, we don't have all of this data here, right? On the high incline, it finishes faster, so you don't have 13, 14, 16, 16. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete those cells. Don't need that. We don't need this here because there's nothing in there. Okay. All right, so displacement looks right. Time interval looks right. Okay. Average velocity looks right. And middle time also looks right. So there we go. Now we've got two sets of this data, and now we need to make the graphs. All right, so here it comes. This is the weirdness. So we're going to put the middle time. I'm going to copy this middle time data here. So from here all the way down to here. So this is my low incline stuff, right? The middle time, I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to come down here to where I have some space. So I'm just going to go underneath here somewhere, and I'm going to paste it. But I'm not going to, if I hit paste, see how it says reference does not exist, gives me an error? That's because it's trying to refer to a formula that calculates from all this stuff over here. So I'm going to undo that, okay? And instead of pasting, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to paste special. Okay? We're going to paste the values only. So that's Command-Shift-V for me, or it might be probably Control-Shift-V if you're using your Chromebook, or maybe Alt-Shift-V. So paste values only. And that way, none of the formulas transfer over with the data. It's just the data. Okay. And then I'm going to take my velocities. There we go. Make sure I get that right. My average velocity, and put down here. Yes, one column. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come down here. And I'm going to, again, paste special, paste only the values. And there we go. So there's our first set of data. If you want to, you can go through and you can delete all these extra spaces. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do that. Let's take this row and we will turn on the wrap. Text wrapping wrap. And now we're going to do the same thing that we did on the position time for the wheel when you made those graphs. We're going to take the middle times here. Copy them. I'm going to paste them down right about here. And again, paste special, paste values only. Make sure I did that right. I just wanted that extra space in there. And then now I'm going to take my velocities. Copy that. I want those velocities to come down to here. Let's see if this works. I'm putting this in the right place. Let's go. Paste special, paste value. Okay. Now, I ended up getting it, so you want to make sure that the middle time here lines up with the velocity over here, right? So this is the average velocity. I'm going to actually take this cell right there. I'm going to cut this out, right? So I'm going to cut. Now I'm going to paste that back up here where it belongs. Paste. Okay. And wrap that text. So what I've got now, I've got 3 columns. I've got my middle time, I've got my independent variable on the left, very leftmost column, and then I've got 2 different columns, but they're kind of spaced out funny. So here's my low average velocity, my high average velocity. For this particular graph or set of data, you don't have to arrange it the way I did, but this is a good way to organize it for. There will be times when you do experiments where the independent variable won't always be the same. My dog is going crazy over there, I'm sorry, because he thinks that there's someone walking around outside. I really hope there's not someone walking around outside. I think it's the dog across the street. I'm really fine. Ah! Come on now. That was funny. All right, so we've got our data organized in 3 different columns here, and now we're going to try and get this stuff to graph. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight all of our data. So click up there in the corner, shift click down here to select it all. Then we go up here to the insert menu, insert chart. And wait a while. And random chart appears where? There it is. Okay. So weird chart appears right about there. So I'm just going to scooch this to the middle screen so you can see it. All right, then I'm going to come over here. Can I close this window so you can't see my face? Because you don't really need to see my face. There we go. Hopefully that's still recording. So we go to the chart type right here. We don't want a column chart probably ever in this class. We want a scatter chart. Okay. And then we've got our data range is what we picked. Okay, so that's right. So long story short, if you wanted to do all this stuff manually, you could insert a chart and then you could type in the coordinates like of the data range that you want. But by dragging it, you just made that part easier. Okay? On the x-axis, we want the middle time, and that's because we put that on the very left side of our data. And then our series, those are what we want on the y-axis. We've got the average velocity low and the average velocity high. So this is set up exactly how we want it to be. And that's because what we did was when we rearranged the data in this weird way, in this odd way with our stuff in 3 different rows, it was exactly what Sheets was looking for to set up the graph like this. And so you can do it differently. Like you can change, you can add a series manually by picking the column, the coordinates of the cells that you want on there. But it's a lot easier to just set up the sheet to do that for you, and then just to have Sheets read your mind. Okay. All right, if you look at this data, it's kind of pretty linear data, right? But what we want is we want some titles and stuff on the graph, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Customize, and I'm going to customize the chart and axis title. So the chart title is going to be velocity versus time. Right? Good. And then my horizontal axis title, I'm going to just put clock reading. And on my vertical axis title, I can put velocity. And that graph looks pretty good. What we want now is let's just work our way down here. We need to put a best fit line on there. Okay. So I'm going to, I clicked on legend. Oops, sorry. Click on legend. And in that legend, there is an option for not what I wanted, I'm sorry. Click on series. Sorry about that. There's an option for trend line. And these are linear, so I'm going to put linear in there. And so you've got different choices here. In this class, linear is what we're almost always going to use. If the thing, if your graph ends up looking curved, power series would be the next thing that you try, and then sometimes polynomial for the purpose of a ninth grade physics class. The other kinds we probably will not see in the scope of this class, but you should know that they're there. So I'm going to pick linear, and then here for label, I'm going to put use equation, and that will put the slope. So here's the slope of the blue graph, and here's the slope of the red graph. Here's the y-intercept of the blue graph. Here's the y-intercept of the red graph. So that puts the slopes on there for you. And then I just want to make sure on this horizontal axis that my minimum value is 0. I think it is. Okay, good. All right, then I think we're good. Everything looks great, right? So we've got 0 to 20 up here on the velocity, and 0 to 15 there. Oh, my goodness, I'm sorry. I forgot to put units on my axis label. So I'm going to go here to the vertical axis title, velocity in centimeters per second, right? And then on my horizontal axis title, clock reading in beats. And I think that graph looks pretty good. All right, so here's our slope. And so we can, when you're doing your mathematical analysis, you don't need to pick points and calculate the slope anymore. You can just use the slope that the spreadsheet has given you. All right, so I can close the chart editor now, and then I can just kind of drag this chart off to the side. Can I? There we go. I can kind of drag this chart off to the side so that you can see it. And there we go. Now we've got these velocity versus time graphs made for our real lab data.